Today I'm excited to show you a haptic device that we've made for altering the friction of real surfaces. So here we can see a user wearing a mixed reality headset, and he's playing a driving game by dragging his finger along this tabletop. Now, when he drives through this virtual puddle, his car spins out and the table suddenly feels slippery. But how can it feel slippery? This is just an ordinary table, right? Let's drive through the puddle again and I'll reveal our secret. We've been depositing a liquid coating onto the finger pad. This coating lubricates the finger, resulting in decreased surface friction. We call our approach Stick&Slip, and this is something that we, myself, Jacob, and Pedro, have been exploring at the University of Chicago. In the last decade, two primary ways for controlling friction have emerged and matured: ultrasonic vibration and electrostatic adhesion. There have been numerous research devices like these, just to cherry pick a few, and even commercial products based on these approaches. However, they're usually just added to special purpose devices like tablets. And so for the sake of augmented reality, I ask, how can we make it so that anything we touch has variable friction? Well, we could simply add these types of actuators into every single object. But unfortunately, this is impractical. We can't cover every single surface with haptic actuators or special coatings. This would be expensive and also require a lot of batteries. And so we need something that gives dynamic friction to even completely passive and ordinary surfaces. So to overcome these limitations, we've been looking beyond the scope of conventional actuators to liquid coatings. In our approach, we deposit small drops of liquid onto the sides of the finger. These coat the finger pad and create an interfacial layer between the finger and the surface. And depending on the liquid that we choose, we can either make it feel more slippery or more sticky. After some time, this liquid dries up and the friction returns back to normal. The key to our approach is that for surfaces coated with liquids, the friction is almost independent of the surface's material. It depends much more on the liquid instead. And so, unlike these prior approaches that would require adding actuators to every surface, our liquid-based approach can change the friction of practically any non-absorbent surface that the user touches. So for this to work well, we need to choose our liquids very carefully. So to guide our selection, we set goals of optimizing for two parameters. First, we wanted liquids that could both increase and decrease friction across a wide range. And secondly, we wanted liquids that are practical to use, so things that will evaporate away or can easily be cleaned. We curated a list of 9 candidate fluids to evaluate. We're all familiar with things like water and oil, but we also found things like water-based lubricant, which we expected to decrease friction, and something called thickened water, which is kind of a viscous gel that we expected to increase the friction. Additionally, we were interested in isopropyl alcohol, or IPA, and acetone. People don't commonly think of these as lubricants, but we were excited by their ability to evaporate away very quickly. Additionally, in the small quantities that we use, they are skin safe and can even be found in cosmetic products. Finally, we tested sugar water and honey mixed into solvents like IPA. Here we envisioned that mixing sugar into IPA would leave a thin adhesive film on the finger as that IPA evaporated. So now that we have this long list of candidate fluids, we want to narrow it down to a couple of usable ones. To do that, we ran a tournament where we designed 4 experiments to evaluate each liquid's ability to not only alter friction, but also be practical. I won't have time to dive especially deep here, so please check out our paper for everything required during the Q&A, but let's start by looking at the influence that each of these has on friction. So here's the plot of the results for the kinetic or sliding friction. The x-axis shows the change in friction compared to no liquid being on the surface. Bars that go to the left indicate a reduction in friction, and bars that go to the right indicate an increase. Looking at water as a point of reference, we can see a slight reduction in the friction. The greatest decreases in friction came from oil, followed by IPA, acetone, and water-based lubricant. On the sticky side of things, the greatest increase in friction came from sugar water, followed by the honeys in the IPA and thickened water. Excitingly, we found that we can modulate friction by more than 50% in either direction using liquids. Another exciting and perhaps unexpected result is that the acetone and the IPA were nearly as lubricating as the oil. So now that we have these results for friction performance, let's cross-examine them with a measure of practicality, their evaporation rates. So here are the results where the x-axis shows the percent of a liquid droplet that remains at a given time, either after 5 minutes or an hour. Even after an hour, most of the water-based liquids remained. In contrast, nearly all IPA and acetone evaporated away in just 5 minutes. In the case of the honey being diluted into IPA, we saw that the IPA evaporates out of the mixture, leaving just the sugar residue behind corresponding to its weight concentration. And so from a practical perspective, we can now easily eliminate unsuitable liquids like oil and water-based liquids that don't evaporate on an interactive timescale. And so this leaves us with liquids that both generate slippery and sticky changes in friction, but are also practical to use. For slippery, we have acetone and IPA, and for sticky, we have the honeys mixed with IPA. Please see our paper for further characterization. For example, we show that these sticky liquids can easily be washed away and negated with a similarly sized droplet of water. To leverage these effects in an interactive device, we built a wearable droplet generator. So the user wears our custom PCB battery and antenna on their wrist. Additionally, on their wrist are these little vials that contain each of the liquids, and micropumps that pump that liquid from the vials through some tubing over to the finger. And on their finger, the user wears a droplet generator that wraps around the sides of their finger, leaving their finger pad free to still feel the real world. To see more of what this device enables, let's return to our user in mixed reality. Again, the user feels slippery going through this virtual puddle, which we now know is from alcohol. The user goes over this prop, and now they're about to feel another virtual effect. These bees have spilled honey all over the racetrack, and this feels sticky. In the background, we're depositing our sticky liquid onto the finger pad, which again is honey diluted into IPA. Since our approach lets users still feel the real world, they can also easily feel things like the texture of these 3D printed toy speed bumps. Now, to see what people thought of this, we brought in 12 participants to try out our device in mixed reality, where they played an extended version of this mixed reality driving game while wearing our device. For both the no haptics baseline and the stick-and-slip condition, participants rated their sense of immersion, enjoyment, and sensory engagement. We found that stick-and-slip provided a more immersive, enjoyable, and engaging experience than the baseline. Notably, all 12 participants preferred stick-and-slip, which gives some indication that participants felt the liquids really added to the experience and were not unpleasant as you might initially expect from something like liquids. We found a few domains where this approach is useful. In addition to mixed reality, we've also been exploring tool use and virtual reality with props. For example, this user uses it to assist him opening a stuck container. As you can see, at first he can't get a great grip on it, so he uses a little applet on his watch to manually deposit sticky liquid on demand. The pumps pump that liquid over to his finger pads, and it takes a second for it to kick in, and then his grip improves and he's able to open it. Our approach is also compatible with prop-based virtual reality, where we can render the haptics of something like a broken water pipe directly onto a physical prop, in this case PVC. So here, the user can feel the slipperiness of this leak coming out of the pipe, and then when he goes to seal up the pipe with some putty, he feels that the pipe is now sticky. So today I've shown how we can get friction feedback out of special purpose devices and onto everyday objects. We achieve this by thinking outside of the box of traditional actuators. Unfortunately, it isn't just friction-based haptics that's been constrained to special purpose devices, but also vibration, heat, and more. And so my PhD research is focused on this question of how can we make haptics scale to be ubiquitous? Well, we've seen sensing weaved into our daily lives. We can't yet say the same for haptics. And I argue that this is in part due to being limited by stock actuators, like vibromotors and Peltiers, and that we need new kinds of haptic actuators designed specifically with scale and real-world interaction in mind. For example, in Magnet.io, I re-engineered vibration actuators into passive patches that can be distributed throughout environments and without batteries. And in Thermal Grasp, I developed thermal feedback devices that can overlay temperature sensations onto real surfaces. To conclude, I want to emphasize that while these approaches may be unconventional, perhaps that's exactly what we need to push haptics into ubiquity. I'd like to thank you all for your attention, as well as my amazing collaborators, Jacob and Pedro, for all their help enabling.